The following is a conversation with Ed Harvey. Ed Harvey is running for county attorney here in Fairfield, Iowa. And the purpose of today's video is really just to get a better sense of who the candidates are, field a few questions from the local community, and I hope you get a lot out of it today. If you watched the one video, I would encourage you to hop over and watch the other one with Chauncey Molding. And as always, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing on YouTube. That certainly helps me out. As you know, it's just me, a couple of cameras, microphones, and a lot of editing behind the scenes. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching. Ed, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned off camera, I extended this invite to both you and Chauncey, and the goal was really just to let the people hear what your campaign's about. So we'll just get to know you a bit more, and yeah, why don't we start with your professional background?
I've been a builder most of my life since I was probably 18. Moved to Fairfield 34 years ago. Was a builder here for quite a few years, and then things were a little slow in the 90s. So I went ahead and went to law school and got out in 2000. Went to work for the Southeast Iowa Drug Task Force, and I still build. I have a subdivision on Walton Road and build Stopacevate homes in my spare time.
So what was the initial drive and motivation for embarking on this journey here for you?
Oh, for running for county attorney?
Yeah.
I was semi-retired from the county attorney's office. I left the county attorney's office 2 years ago. I've been working part-time doing juvenile work, city attorney for Fort Madison, which is very part-time. And I've been doing a bunch of conflict. I'm doing 70-some conflict cases for Lee County that occurred because one of their people became a judge. But I really what it came down to is I was concerned with the events of last fall. We just had too many things that I thought related to a drug issue. Geographically, because we're situated between two communities that have serious drug problems, Burlington and Ottumwa, we have a drug situation, hard drugs situation here that's worse than other towns our size. Washington, Pella, Grinnell, Oskaloosa don't have the problems we have. So I had then, after the task force, spent 14 years in Henry County, and I was hired there to deal with the drug problem that they had, and I had pretty good luck in helping with apprehension of your harder drug dealers, as well as prevention programs. So after having some people ask me about it, I finally decided last fall to take the skill set I have in those areas and try to apply it here in Jefferson County.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like, how many terms do you think it's going to take, and how many are you up for?
Well, I'm 62. However, my wife's only 50, so I'm going to be working for a while. I've got a son who's just started college. I've got grandkids in the area. I think I would want to do 2 terms. Assuming I could get elected 1 term, I would run for a 2nd term. It would probably take, depending on how long it takes to get the necessary resources in place and the help from the other agencies, it'll probably take 2 or 3 years to effectively deal with the drug issues we have here, get the prevention programs in place. And then the next term would be spent trying to just establish this as a new norm. Right now, the norm we have is a little different than what I would want the norm to be. So I think in two terms, we could fix the problem, establish the new norm as it would be with things greatly improved in these areas, and by then hopefully somebody younger that could work with all the other agencies that need to be worked with would come along, and I would leave.
But the primary focus, as I think I've heard you mention before, is drugs, cleaning up the drugs in the community.
The reality, and you may know, there were 4 different county sheriffs that have gone together to support me. The sheriffs of Henry County, Jefferson County, Wapello County, Ottumwa, and Davis County, which is Bloomfield. All those guys have worked with me. 2 of them are Democrats, 2 are Republicans, and they've all believe that I have the necessary skill set to fix it. But more importantly, any of those guys would tell you, or any experienced probation officer or law enforcement person, that 80 to 90% of all our problems, all our crime is drug related. So it's not that I spend a lot of time obsessing over drugs, but if we solve the drug problem, we solve 80 to 90% of problems, which are your property crimes, a lot of your domestics, sexual assaults. When I was thinking of running, I asked some of the sheriffs, I said, try to picture what crimes don't have a drug connection, because I prosecuted a lot of sexual assaults and that over the years, and unfortunately there's a drug connection to most all of those serious crimes.
There was too some general concern. I fielded a question from someone who was just wanting to know more about your voting history.
Well, there's two answers to that. So let me just explain my voting history. Back, first time I could vote was early 80s, and I voted for Ronald Reagan. At the time, I was a builder out of state. Interest rates were over 20%, and I just felt like we needed to do a change. I did that. I have not voted for a Republican for president since the 80s. The two major concerns I have that motivate me are the environment, global warming, and staying out of unnecessary wars. So once these wars were started, I absolutely did not support any Republican president. So I voted for Obama both times. I voted for Al Gore. I voted whoever ran against Bush both times. And I actually, after the 2016 election, because my concern for the environment and global warming, and my thought that after the 2016 presidential election that the environment was not going to be a major concern for the new administration, my son and I, started the CC Oak Tree Farm. We started our own tree farm on the theory that it'd be a little thing we could do in southeast Iowa, but we would grow hardwood trees and sell them at a reasonable price. So to that end, we've done that. We've probably sold 1,000 trees in the southeast Iowa, far up as Marshalltown and Mason City, where they had the tornado and the derecho damages.
I did some of the insurance adjusting for the derecho storm.
Yeah, they were a good market. We sold 300 trees to them last year. That was how I could kind of satisfy my environmental issues. And in terms of, we started a tree farm. I drive a Prius. My wife drives a Prius. My son drives a little electric car. The Democratic Party is much more aligned with protecting the environment and taking action for global warming. So those are my major concerns. That's what I identify with. And somebody asked me if I lost this, would I run as a Republican in the primary? And my answer was I would rather lose as a Democrat than run as a Republican, which quite frankly, this is typically the party out of power, different party than what the president is, does well in an off election year. So it probably would be easier to get elected as a Republican in this county at this time, but those aren't my policies and those aren't my views, so I will run as I am as a Democrat.
Yeah. So Ed, maybe you could speak more to the experience that you would bring as county attorney.
Well, and I had this conversation with what I referred to as the 4 sheriffs that I had worked with all of those individuals, and I think what would sum my way of doing business up differently than maybe other county attorneys have done it or do it, is that I believe in a much more proactive approach. And so to that end, and we're going to talk about drugs right now because, again, drugs are responsible for most of our crime. So I divide the drug issue into apprehension of hardcore drug dealers. When I say hardcore, what I mean is those who more or less full-time sell drugs. That's their business. And those drugs are hard drugs, we're not talking marijuana. And then we also would separate the apprehension from the prevention. So in terms of apprehension, I remember one of the first things I did with the task force, and back in the day, that was when meth labs were the rage. And we had a meth cook, a pretty prolific cook, and he was stealing anhydrous from all sorts of different locations. And that was frequently how law enforcement would catch an individual. They'd have to stake out the anhydrous tank. So what I proposed was, we knew where this individual lived out in the county, this was in Davis County, and we knew what road he would travel to, the main road. So I proposed just getting our own tank, setting it out in the back of a field, and we did it where some hay bales were so law enforcement could have concealment. And this would be a tank that, rather than us try to find what tank he's going to, we will just give him a tank to go to. It took a couple days, and he was apprehended. So that's just, and that was kind of an unusual thing to do back then. When I went to Henry County, what we did, we put together a list of the most prominent drug dealers, and then we hooked up with the different agencies, state narcotics, sheriffs, police departments, and other counties' law enforcement agencies, and just kind of came up with a plan as to what would be the best way to apprehend these people. Then another thing I did as an ongoing basis as an assistant county attorney was, in my reality is that law enforcement rarely can solve a crime without help from the public. Information from the public is vital. So I would develop, basically informants, people that had been in trouble. We would talk to their attorney and them, figure out some trade information for lowering the charges. So one case, we had somebody show up on an initial appearance, first day in court, and we talked. And it was probably 3 hours later, a search warrant was being executed at a drug dealer's house near the high school. A bunch of drugs there, not marijuana, and guns, and it was just nice to be able to take that information we had and immediately get some positive results from utilizing that information. So I was very proactive about developing informants, and that went beyond just getting the information and reducing their charges. Typically, if somebody's been arrested, even if there's no conviction, that arrest shows up on a record and can affect them in trying to get a job, in obtaining rental housing, or going to school, particularly going to community college or college. So a lot of what I did would be help those people once they had shown that they were in good shape. I would, through letters or phone calls or even personal visits to a couple different colleges, would help these people overcome the obstacles from their previous actions and be able to move forward with their lives.
Well, that certainly sounds like a good thing. And a couple of folks have asked, is there any conflict of interest here that your ex-wife is an employee of the police department?
I've heard that. That's been brought up, and the answer is just no. First off, the operative term would be ex-wife. We've been divorced for over 17 years now. We have no more financial entanglements of any kind, have not for 17 years. We have one child together who is out of high school, going to college, and then lives at my house when he's not in college. Additionally, when I heard this, and just to be clear, attorneys can maybe say there's a conflict. It's up to a judge to determine a conflict. So to that end, I did go to a district court judge, and he actually laughed when I asked him the question, because it's so far removed in time, and it's unclear what advantage one of us would have and what or disadvantage it would be. It's such a tenuous connection that there just is not a conflict in any way in the legal system, nor would it be to work with her.
Yeah, got it. We're just going through some of the questions that folks gave us, and there was also some concern, with the high-profile trials that are coming up. If you assume your position as county attorney and we're switching, the legal team, is that going to be some?
I don't know the trial strategy of the current county attorney. There's a couple different answers to that question. My understanding is these trials are set for in the fall, and January is when the new term begins for the county attorney. However, I will explain this. I've been involved in a couple murder trials myself as a county attorney or assistant county attorney. And in those cases, the Attorney General's office offered assistance. And to explain that, the Attorney General's office has a branch called Area Prosecutions. And they specialize in going around the state providing prosecutors for murder cases. I have worked 2 cases with Scott Brown. Scott Brown is the director of the area prosecutions, and Scott has put in an appearance in both of these cases. Now, what role he will play in these cases and how the workload is divided, I have no idea, and is not my concern. But in my experience with Scott Brown, he's done dozens of murder cases. Not too long ago in Henry County, he did one where we had a no-body case. The body had never been found, and he got a conviction. I also was involved in the Bentler killings when a young man killed his parents and 3 sisters in Van Buren County. And I dealt with the preliminary stuff in that one. Scott Brown put in an appearance. The last year or 2, Scott Brown was an attorney that handled the Molly Tibbetts murder case. It was a fairly high-profile case. So my way of dealing with Scott Brown would be to simply ask him how I could assist him. He's done dozens of murder cases, probably hands down the best homicide prosecutor in the state. I would defer to how he wants to divide the workload, and I would help him in any way I could, assist him to do the trials. And again, he has already put in an appearance in both of these cases, so I know he has some involvement. I don't know exactly what it is, but he would be available, and having done literally dozens of murder cases, I would completely defer to how he wants to do it, and I believe that would serve the county best to have such an experienced prosecutor taking lead on those cases.
Yeah. It's kind of surreal to hear all of this, and like sometimes I listen to true crime, and I won't get into it too much, but it seems like a heavy burden for a county attorney, that it's really an incredible public service. Surely it takes a certain personality to get in there and it not keep you up at night.
I've got a couple things I'm really passionate about doing. I love building homes. I've been doing that for 40-some years. And I like being a prosecutor and protecting the public. I was on the fire department for 9 years here. I viewed that as part of protecting the public. I believe I'm fairly effective, and I don't think the 4 area sheriffs would be supporting me if they didn't have confidence in my ability to do it. So if it's something if it's a skill set you have and you could benefit the community with that skill set, then I feel it's the thing I need to do.
Well, listen, Ed, I really appreciate your answers to all these questions, and I know our time today is kind of limited. This will probably be a shorter episode on the podcast, but I do think you have this interesting background of being a firefighter, and you say that you're raising trees, or what was it again, a farm?
Well, we started a tree farm 4 years ago when the feeling was that the federal government's priority was not going to be the environment. And I guess my underlying, the things I think about when I wake up in the morning is, if we don't deal with global warming and the related issues, and none of the other problems matter that much, we have to keep our planet habitable. So to that end, the one little thing I thought we could do was start a tree farm with hardwood trees, ones that are native to this area. So we've done that and sell them at a low cost. And the other thing that I'm passionate about, I guess, is my feeling is that we want to keep our community, we want the highest quality of life possible in our community. And I feel my skill set of what I've done in the past, and this is why the sheriffs are supporting me, we need to take whatever steps we can to make the quality of life in Jefferson County the highest it can be. So those are the primary motivating factors in how I make decisions and what I do.
Very good. Well, thanks so much, Ed, for being on the show. I really appreciate your time today, and best of luck to you.
All right. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks so much for tuning in.